in the United States last year for Bitcoin. And really what it started out as was, hey, there's a public health crisis, right? I mean, just absolute fell off a cliff. At that time, there was a lot of people who said it's going to zero.
Everyone is going to eventually kind of coalesce around the thing that they can guarantee with 100% certainty. My conviction has deepened in what I've been talking about for the last couple of years. People who go and figure out how to get involved early will be beneficiaries.
Haven't I missed Bitcoin? Haven't I missed the run in Bitcoin? Isn't it fully priced at these levels if you given where it started?
Yeah, I mean, look, any asset starts out at a low price and then has volatility. It can go up, it can go down. If you look at something like Amazon, I think Amazon stock when they IPO'd in the late 90s was $18. Today, Amazon's price is over $3,300 per share. And that's not a straight line, right? There's all kinds of splits and everything along the way. Lots of volatility. Amazon stock at one point dropped over 90%. There's also kind of double-digit drawdowns on an annual basis. The average intra-year drawdown of Amazon stock is over 30%. And so when you have a highly volatile asset, the reason why that's happening is because there's innovation. There's a repricing of the asset, right? The world is trying to figure out what is this worth. And so if you had looked at Amazon stock at $18, you could have looked backwards and said, oh, I could have invested in the seed round or in the Series A. I missed it. Now it's a publicly traded company and there's going to be no returns. You would have been wrong. If you had then waited till it was 100 or 250 or 500 or 1,000 or even $2,000, you still along the way would have thought, oh, I missed it. But what you end up finding is for the small few assets that actually are disruptive, that are highly innovative, and that do benefit from true market price discovery, you aren't late. Actually, what ends up happening is you're probably underestimating the future price performance or the future appreciation. You're underestimating how addressable the market is. And so I think an asset like Bitcoin is a perfect example where what you're talking about is about 100 million people globally out of 7.5 billion people in the world. Only 100 million people have any sort of relationship, ownership, or interaction with this asset. And so what you're essentially saying is that 100 million people would be the total addressable market, that it's captured everything that it's going to capture, and there's going to be no one else who's going to want this. And so I think that the belief that it's too late really just kind of refutes or ignores history. And then also is kind of a pessimistic view of the future. It's to say that all of the innovation is done, all of the people who need this have found it, and therefore there's no future kind of value to capture or create. And I just don't agree with that.
How much, in your view, was Bitcoin, as Elon Musk tweeted, sort of inevitable, that people were going to learn about this one hell of an invention, as Ray Dalio called it? And how much of it's driven by the macroeconomic backdrop, this massive expansion of the money supply, money printing by central banks? So did it just accelerate a trend that was already happening, or what's your view of sort of the macroeconomics and how that's driving the adoption of Bitcoin?
Yeah, look, I think that what's really interesting about Bitcoin is I have yet to meet somebody who spends the time, is open-minded, intellectually curious, does the work, learns about Bitcoin, can explain it back in very simple terms, right? Kind of showcasing their understanding, and does not believe that it will have a place in the world. There may be disagreement in terms of how important it will be, or how large it will be, or who will hold it. But I have a very hard time finding anyone who says it will be worthless, right? If they've kind of done the work and become educated on it. So I think that's kind of a key piece. And so what that tells you is that as more and more people learn about it, the inevitability of understanding this will be a thing was always there. Now, what I do think has happened is in the macro environment in terms of monetary policy intervention, and frankly, just a lack of discipline across economies and central banks, is that we essentially had a $3 trillion marketing campaign, or almost $4 trillion marketing campaign running in the United States last year for Bitcoin. And really what it started out as was, hey, there's a public health crisis that is going to lead to an economic crisis. When that economic crisis happens, we are going to have elected officials in the Federal Reserve that's going to step in, they're going to intervene, they're going to manipulate the market to try to mitigate short-term pain. When they did that, anyone who was paying attention said, wait a second, they're going to print a lot of money. There is a fear of inflation, whether it comes or not. We fear that the inflation is coming, and therefore there is a potential issue at hand. And they went on a global scavenger hunt looking for the best market or asset in which they could move their wealth so that they could protect the purchasing power and benefit from the activities of the central bank. That the inflation hedge bucket of assets is going to do very well in this environment. And inside of that bucket, Bitcoin will be the big winner. Bitcoin will outperform all of the other assets, whether you look at real estate, precious metals, even stocks to some example, et cetera. And so far, and we're not out of the woods yet, but so far, what we have seen is that if you came to that conclusion, you were right. And so I think that, in kind of March of 2020, Bitcoin was trading somewhere between like $8,000 to $10,000. And I think it was March 12th, it literally fell below $4,000, right? I mean, just absolute fell off a cliff. At that time, there was a lot of people who said it's going to zero. But what I continued to tell people, and I think was really important to understand, was we were in a liquidity crisis. And during a liquidity crisis, investors sell off any asset that has a liquid market so that they can raise dollars, right? The dollar strengthens, asset prices sell off, you get correlations going towards one, and that's what happened to Bitcoin, happened to gold, happened to stocks, and all kind of across the board. But now all of a sudden, as there was this liquidity injected into the market, and you literally just had a system that was flush with cash, everyone ran for protection. And Bitcoin ended up being the great beneficiary of that. What I think has happened is not only an acceleration of just the adoption in terms of individuals and some financial institutions buying it, but I think actually psychologically, people were reminded we live in a system that is guaranteed for the dollar to lose value. And it is a system in which if you can find a capped supply asset where demand will continue to increase over time and has utility as both a store of value and a medium of exchange, it is likely to do much, much better because of the programmatic monetary policy and the decentralized security that it brings. And so that's where you see kind of people going from, I know nothing about Bitcoin, I don't want to spend the time on it, I've got a pretty good life, to now rotating and saying, wait a minute, this is the most important invention, right? Or this is something I'm going to go take literally 90+% of my balance sheet. I'm going to go convert it from dollars into Bitcoin.
And so same thing's going to happen here. So you're going to have the nefarious countries or the bad actors. They're going to use it first, and eventually every other country will use it as well. It just is a foregone conclusion that everyone is going to eventually kind of coalesce around the thing that they can guarantee with 100% certainty that no one else is manipulating. The problem, and we saw it for the last 4 years with President Trump's administration, right, was the relative devaluation of currencies and the constant battle. Who was devaluing more? Who was manipulating their currency or their economy more? Now, all of a sudden, there is a currency that no one controls, and everyone knows with 100% certainty that is provable how scarce it is and what the monetary policy is. And it's on display every day for auditability. And so I think that that's where central banks eventually are going to realize humans are really good at monetary policy until machines get involved. Just like many things, machines are better at doing things than humans. We are a machine. We just happen to have a lot of bias, fear, greed, emotion, etc. And so when you get into this programmatic monetary policy world, what ends up happening is having an immutable record of all transactions and having that programmatic monetary policy is superior. And then when you add in the fact that the legacy fiat currencies are being devalued at such a scary rate, it's no wonder that citizens, corporations, and financial institutions are all racing to go find how do they protect their wealth. And Bitcoin is the recipient and the beneficiary of that global surge.
Well, on that note, I want to get your thoughts on the other big news item for Bitcoin this week. BlackRock authorizing 2 of its funds to invest in Bitcoin futures. This was according to filings from the SEC. The move allows exposure to cryptocurrency for clients of the world's largest asset manager for the first time. How significant is this news?
Yeah, look, if you think Wall Street's going to sit by and watch everyone else, quote unquote, get rich, there's no way that's happening. And so every single institution on Wall Street has now realized that Bitcoin has gone from a contrarian idea to a consensus idea. They're all doing something, whether they want to just buy Bitcoin and hold it long, whether they want to trade it, whether they want to market make, whether they want to invest in companies or in the infrastructure around the asset, they're all doing something. And it's because the writing is on the wall. The future global financial system is going to be digital. It is going to be decentralized. And the people who go and figure out how to get involved early will be beneficiaries. Just like the people who realize if I use the internet and I use a computer to conduct my financial transactions, I have an advantage over those who are not doing it yet. The same thing is happening now. The people who realize if I use the digital decentralized version, I can actually invest in the same exact asset. And I can usually do it in a transaction with the same counterparty. I'm just now buying a stock, bond, currency, or commodity in a digital format rather than electronic CUSIP format. And so the people who are there early will get the beneficiary of that kind of outsized performance. Eventually that will get commoditized down, just like in the move from the analog world to the kind of an electronic CUSIP world. Same thing, move from electronic CUSIP world to a digital world. And so BlackRock's realizing that, so is everybody else on Wall Street. And as I keep saying, is Bitcoiners don't want to sell their Bitcoin, but the institutions want Bitcoin. And so the US dollar price has to appreciate in order to accommodate everyone.
I like how you described Bitcoin as the ultimate financial apex predator. Um, you use your platform to dispel a lot of myths and things that get under your skin that circulate surrounding Bitcoin. So a lot of FUD out there. What are some of the top three that really get under your skin? I know the Tether one bothers you, but what do you think are the biggest rumors or just myths surrounding Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, so nothing gets under my skin. I'm super chill. Like I kind of have gotten to the point where look, I will continue to educate people on this stuff. I will continue to have probably more skin in the game than almost anybody I know, and I believe that this is what's going to happen. I'm willing to be wrong in public about it. I am also willing to have my mind changed if the information changes. But so far, not only has my conviction not changed, my conviction has deepened in what I've been talking about for the last couple of years. And so what I think is, really kind of frustrating to some people is when folks that have large platforms or positions of power or influence start to discuss things that they just haven't spent the time to educate themselves on, right? So when people start to say it's a Ponzi scheme, well, if you look at the definition of a Ponzi scheme, like there's just no correction, no correlation whatsoever to Bitcoin. And so that's almost a sign to me that somebody just hasn't spent the time and isn't educated. Now, there's two ways to respond when people have these kind of misconceptions or misinformed. One, we can sit and we can ridicule, mock, and basically make fun of these people and say, hey, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Have fun staying poor, kind of all the memes that fly around on Twitter and Reddit. Or we can do the exact opposite. And what I try to do is I basically reach out to the person and say, hey, listen, I saw that you said this. I disagree with it. I think that I can share some information with you that may change your mind. Are you open to a conversation? And again, not everyone takes me up on it, but what I try to do is just say, look, I'm here to have a rational conversation, right? I'm not here to be kind of a Luddite when it comes to this is the only way. And regardless of how the information changes, I'll never change my mind. Like I just have blind belief.
To the Citadel.
Instead, it's on a very frequent basis, I evaluate the market, I evaluate the asset, I evaluate the alternatives, and I evaluate all of the players in the market, and I continue to have conviction here. Here's why. You may agree with me, you may not, but I think having a rational, welcoming conversation to the people who are uninformed is actually the best way to kind of accelerate all of this rather than kind of ridicule and mock folks.